As you are all aware, the notion of soft power emerged in the United States, and it is an indication of the extraordinary dominance, intellectual hegemony, as well as capacity of US media and communication networks to distribute that discourse around the world, that public diplomacy and soft power has become a major field of inquiry in many, many countries. In almost all major nations, you have a public diplomacy department within foreign ministries. People from different public relations and branding organizations are hired by governments to promote their country to largely Western audiences. In case of India, the story is slightly more complicated. Although Indian government too has done this, there's a public diplomacy division within the Ministry of External Affairs. They have done various projects, including the well-known Incredible India campaign to promote tourism in India. But Indian influence of what is India today, influence of that part of the world, has a much more complicated history. If we look at, for example, spread of Buddhism from India, as you see on this map, it was available all over Asia. And today, China is the largest Buddhist country in the world, while in India, Buddhism is a minor religion. Now that's happened 2,500 years ago. And then the question is that hard or soft power? Why don't we define it as soft power? Because it's enduring power. It's been there for 2,500 years. And it's not just about branding. It's about culture and ideas and religion and philosophy. And it's a deep influence. And the idea of non-violence, which is central to Buddhist thought, has had great impact, especially in Indian tradition. Think of Mahatma Gandhi, for example, who was arguably the most influential Indian of the last century. Was he a soft or a hard power proponent? And even today we see Gandhian influence in various shapes and forms across the globe. There's also another dimension of India's presence outside India, which is the notion that it's a spiritual culture, a kind of religiosity which is celebratory. So you see here Acharya Rajneesh, the famous sex guru, very popular in this country particularly. Mahesh Yogi, who set up the Transcendental Meditation University here and also in Europe. And of course, the Hare Krishnas that you see in many major cities in Europe and in this country, promoting a celebratory kind of religiosity. And that again has a very old history and creates a particular perception of India as a non-threatening, otherworldly, spiritual kind of place. Reality might be different, but the perception is that. And then you have the government-organized promotional tours where a particular version of Indian culture, high culture, is promoted. This is a picture from a Festival of India held in New York. These are regularly organized, largely by the government, but support from private capital, and is part of this public diplomacy effort that certain bureaucrats are paid to do. How successful it is remains deeply questionable, at least in my book. But beyond this high culture, which has a relatively small audience, it's really the elite audience, there is another version of India, a popular version, which Bollywood represents as being the world's largest film factory. They've been exporting films since 1930s to over 70 countries. It's a major industry. The media and entertainment industry today is in the range of $29 billion. And as you see in these posters, one from Soviet Union and one more recently from China, the audience for this kind of cinema is actually quite wide. It's only very recently that the Western world has discovered Bollywood in the last 20 years, but actually, as you see there in this film, Shri Char Sabis was a major hit in Soviet Union, and that actor, Raj Kapoor, is still very popular in certain generation of Russians. It's also the diaspora which has been important in the context of promoting the popular culture. Also the high culture, but largely the popular culture. An Indian diaspora is the world's second largest diaspora after the Chinese one. It's about 25 million people. It is also the world's largest English-speaking diaspora. And as you see on this map, it is scattered all over the globe. And the amount of remittances that Indians sent back to India is the largest in the world. I think last year it was 70 billion plus. And most of that money comes from Middle East, where lots of working class Indians live and work. But they are not seen as a soft power resource by government of India. It is actually the diaspora which is located in more prosperous parts of the globe, namely the United States, where diaspora is seen as a very important instrument of promoting soft power. So there's a kind of apartheid in place for understandable reasons. Now, diaspora here is something in the range of 2.2 million people, and the numbers have doubled in the last 20 years. It used to be about 1 million Indians used to live here. Now it's 2.2 million, and this extra million is really largely professional class of Indians, highly educated, upwardly mobile, connected in this globalized economy. Here are some examples of that. And I've chosen them for a very particular reason. They belong to areas which have soft power influence. Journalism, elite journalism, of course, corporate world, and elite universities. It is not unusual to go to an Ivy League university in this country to find an Indian professor, and she's generally well regarded in her field. So there is something about that intellectual power that India is to offer. Incidentally, all three of them had their first degree in India. And it may also be worth mentioning that if you want to reach that level, you have to lose your hair. I think there is need to really de-Americanize the discourse. Professor Nai's work is extremely important, but it is very American. It doesn't take into account the more complex histories of countries like China, India, other places. And also worth remembering that his work can also not be divorced, his academic work cannot be divorced from his policy work. He was, after all, very closely associated with two major administrations, Carter and Clinton, and today also had some very important think tank. I don't think we have really taken very seriously what are going to be the cultural consequences of rise of India. We've seen it as a market, as an outsourcing thing for IT industry. But as a culture, as a civilization, I don't think that has been discussed much. I think particularly important in this context is how Islam is framed in global debates. Because if the British colonialism had not divided India, it would have had the largest Muslim population in the world. Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. And today it's the third largest Muslim country. So there's a huge relationship with Islam which goes back centuries. And also representation of Islam in, for example, Bollywood are slightly more nuanced than what you would see in Hollywood. And my final point, which is really quite important and relates to my title for this talk, is about development. That despite real impressive economic growth, India remains home to the largest number of poor people on this planet. On unimaginable index, it fares exceedingly badly, despite being the largest democracy in the world, despite being now in purchasing power parity term, the third largest economy in the world. So it's a both moral and material imperative to talk about development, not in a manner that is defined in New York by the World Bank, but actually a different kind of discourse which draws on those traditions of Buddha and Gandhi and Nehru, and which understands why there is poverty, and also increasingly look elsewhere for models, not just in the United States. And I think that dimension of soft power, connecting with what's happening with internet, and also very important to remember the demographics, because India is a very young country, although very old civilization. 70% of Indians are below the age of 35. That translates into 700 million people. Of course, majority of them are poor, but there's a sizable number which is upwardly mobile, connected, globalized. So how they deal with this development is not only relevant for India, but actually for much of the world. Thank you.